Hi friends, before we get to today's video, week 4, message to Will Clark, to the Thrill, invite to come to our show. I got 2 questions that I want to ask. Big Giants fan, and you're the reason, I believe, or one of the reasons at least, along with Robbie Thompson, Jose Uribe, and the whole crew in 1986, to help keep baseball in San Francisco. So I'd like to ask you those 2 questions and really talk about the greatness of Will the Thrill as a San Francisco Giant. To all our listeners, let's get to the show. Please like and subscribe. You guys are helping us blow up. It's great. Appreciate it so much. We'll see you. Start the show. And we're back. Generations, talking about my sports generation. As always, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Steve. Hey, everybody. How are we doing today?
Mark, I'm a tortured Knicks fan.
So we've got a new formula that has been happening the last few weeks, and it started with I gave you, our listeners, who we love and adore and appreciate, all of you listening. Please like and subscribe. You guys have been turning out over these last several weeks, and we really, really appreciate it. I started with 40 years of oral history of the Raiders. And painful for me, I think enjoyable for my other 2 hosts to hear how it the decline happened really, really fast. And then, rest in power, Garrett Anderson. Steve gave us the oral history of his Los Angeles, California, Anaheim, of Los Angeles, of California, Angels, oral history. But now, we are going to get one that I have been waiting for because I've heard bits and pieces of this over the last, wow, Mark and I have been friends now for 15 years. That's incredible. So I've heard bits and pieces of this,
Yeah.
but I'm going to get to hear it all at once and be able to put it together. But before I get going, Steve, any comments for our fans? Any messages? Anything more on the Angels? Anything happening this week before we let Mark take it off?
No, listen, I'm really looking forward to the Knicks report by Mark because I've followed the Knicks for a long time. Obviously, they were a nemesis of the Lakers in the late 60s, early 70s. But no, this is a good week. NFL draft happened, the playoffs come, and if you watch the playoffs, you see that it's a totally different game than regular season. I mean, they're literally nothing. It's like pickleball versus tennis. It's kind of crazy how hard these guys play and how well they do. So yeah, I'm into basketball. I've been watching the Knicks from a distance, and they've had some bad luck this early playoffs against the Hawks, but we'll see. So anyways, I'm ready to hear all about the Knicks. I hope it goes back to my generation when it was the Red Holtzman, Clyde Frazier, Willis Reed crew, but that might be a little before your time, huh?
I just want to touch on what you said about the Knicks haven't had luck this playoffs so far. When it's a trend, is it even luck? I mean, it's the same thing every year. Just bad decisions, painful games, painful ends of games, and we're right back there this spring. So yeah, I'll jump into it. I'm going to tell you that first, the Knicks are the most important franchise in basketball that hasn't won in over 50 years. So that's the qualifier. But really, what I have loved about the Knicks since I was a kid is that first, Madison Square Garden feels like you're watching a play. Like when you're there, the lights are dim, everything is just focused on the court, and it feels like you're really watching a show. And like you're right off of Broadway and near Times Square, and it's just like as a kid, I always just thought it was the coolest thing, and it was like the show in town. And so that's how I got into them as a kid. And I'm going to start with the Knicks in the 80s and early 90s, because that's what I remember. But Steve, we can spend some time talking about the Knicks before then. But the story I will be telling So I will go to you, but the story I will be telling is the story about being close, being early on some guys, being way late on some guys, and sometimes just being completely wrong. So obviously, they had some success before that. So, Steve, what do you remember about the Knicks before my generation?
Well, my recollection of the Knicks was where they were a team. They were very well coached, and they all had roles. So they had, the big guard Clyde Frazier, who wasn't much of a scorer but could play real good defense and move the ball. They had the shooting guard, either Dickie Barnett or Earl Monroe. Then they had the classic forwards, Dollar Bill Bradley shooting forward, Dave DeBusschere, the rugged forward, and they had Willis in the middle. And they all knew their roles. That's just what they did. And they passed the ball. They were considered a very, I think they're considered a fairly intellectual team. They played real good team basketball, and they won a couple championships. And then the guys off the bench were no slouches either. That Phil Jackson, Jerry Lucas, who was one of the best college players of all time, and Jerry Lucas, just an aside, if he was in the NBA now, I mean, they'd run out of money printing for him because, I mean, he was like a Dirk. He was like a big man. He was 6'10 or 6'11 who could really shoot it. Now, they didn't shoot threes back then, but he'd shoot 18-footers. I remember the year they beat the Lakers in the championship, and Wilt, would not come out to guard him. Wilt was a rim protector, and he took that very seriously. He protected the rim. Lucas hung out at 16, 17 feet and just popped him in all game long, and it really disrupted the Lakers. So my recollection of the Knicks in the early 70s was they were the consummate team. And although the guys were good, the number in the Hall of Fame, they didn't have Wilt, they didn't have Russell, they didn't have guys like that, but they just played solid team basketball that catapulted into 2 titles. And they kind of had a stamp on New York basketball. That's how it's done. So even though they beat the Lakers, I think both times in the championships, they were a pleasure to watch. They were a real good team where guys knew their roles. Unlike now, where everyone's just Swiss Army knife, jack of all trade. I mean, look, is LeBron a point guard? Is he a power forward? Is he a three? What is it? The Knicks had roles. They played them expertly. Good coaching and very, very solid team.
Oh, that must have been really nice. I don't know what that was like. Jonathan, I swear I do love this team, but I'm going to be really honest about how I feel. Jonathan, how about you? What do you remember growing up about the Knicks?
They were trash. They were trash. They were terrible. I mean, you had this right, so they were great. And then by the time when I started watching basketball, just before they got Ewing,
Yeah.
they were garbage. But I loved Bernard King. Bernard King was a warrior, and Bernard King was, and I truly believe he doesn't have the knee injury. He's Jordan before Jordan. Like, he did everything. And then after the injury, and then when he's on the Nets, how he was able to change his game and stay in the league and still be one of the best players in the NBA. So, yeah, in the early, when I started watching basketball, they weren't very good. And all you hear, and they would always talk, and even this was then, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, they were great. It's like, really? I never saw it. And here we are today. So I'm sorry, but yeah, they were garbage until Ewing.
Yep. Yeah, it's been some time. And so we can start with Ewing. So obviously 1984, Ewing arrives. That is a big moment for the team, gets them to some kind of legitimacy, and they become relevant again, or start to. The problem, though, is also timing of who's in the league at that same time. So, you got some dudes on the Lakers, some guy, Celtics. You got this unknown kid named Michael Jordan that just kind of comes out of nowhere and just dominates. And so I wasn't that into them in the 80s because I was really little, but I did know that they were tough. They were a defense first kind of team, physical, and by the end of the 80s and into the early 90s, that's when they're really building that core, obviously with Ewing, and then in comes Charles Oakley and John Starks, who is my favorite. So, Steve, you have thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I was just kind of refreshing my history lessons on the Knicks, and I'd forgotten how badly Stark shot the ball in the
Oh,
finals,
oh,
and
we're gonna
and
get there. Yeah.
the team was begging to put Rolando Blackman in, and Starks kept launching these bad shots. So yeah, I always liked John Starks, but boy, he had two. He had a bad game six, a bad game seven that basically sunk him.
So he did and he didn't. We'll just jump right into that. I was gonna like give it a moment and just talk about like how much I like him, but we can go there. I mean, first though, like up until this point, up until '94, the Knicks were good enough to matter, but they weren't good enough to win. And in a way, that's like kind of where they are today, right? Like, okay, like they're good. They're going to win 50 something games. They got some guys. Oh, tonight so and so steps up, but Brunson's always playing well, and then some other guy steps up, and then the next night that guy's invisible, and somebody else maybe gets a few buckets, and so like cool, you get 50 something wins in the Eastern Conference, and do you really think you're going to win the title? No. So that's kind of like where they were in the early 90s, up until 94, when they, you know, make it all the way to the finals. Obviously, they have Pat Riley. They're up against the Rockets in the final. Obviously, you got to make it through. Well, not Jordan at that point, but you got to make it through the Pacers. And so, you know, the thing I think we forget about Starks in the finals that year is that earlier that season, I think it was in March, he had knee surgery. So, like, he was just coming back and he helped get the team to the finals. And he got the team in the position to get to a game six where they could win it. And game six, they lost by 2 points. So, like, you're telling me there's no other guy on the Knicks who could have gotten 2 more points that whole game or 3 more points. Like, they lost it at the very end. So, and then game seven, like, he had no legs in him. Like, again, not defending. Like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be chucking it up every time. And I know, I believe it was Riley saying, like, I probably should have taken him out at a certain point. But, like, who else was going to shoot on that team in terms of like the starting five? Because back then, the guys were playing 40 minutes. It's not like now where, oh, they play 32 minutes and you got to go 9, 10 deep. The teams weren't going 9 or 10 deep. They go 6, 7 deep, and then that sixth man is playing maybe 20 minutes. The seventh man, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And so, like, who is that sixth man? Anthony Mason? Fine player, but more of a defensive guy. And so who's really going to be hitting shots right then? Also, wasn't Doc Rivers injured? So, like, he wasn't even in the playoffs for the team. And so, like, look, obviously it's not just an honor to be nominated and, okay, cool, he made it to the finals. But, like, I think putting it in perspective that he had just come back from injury. The team had some other injuries. It's not a deep team. It's not an offense first team. Like, I'm not excusing going 2 for 18 in game seven, but they wouldn't have gotten there, I think, without the performance of Starks through the playoffs. Steve, Jonathan, what do you think of that? Am I just a Starks apologist?
You know what? I agree with you because I'm refreshing my memory on who was on this roster, and the top 5 or 6, like you said, are pretty solid. They're pretty strong. But then you start getting into Herb Williams.
Yeah.
It says that he was 35 during the season. I think I think they have it backwards. I think he was 53.
Yeah.
Because Herb Williams looked 35 when he was a rookie. Tony Campbell was on this team. Tony Campbell, again, it says he's 31 at this point. I swear, if you would have told me he was 37, 38, 40 years old. You have Anthony Bonner, another Golden State Warrior. Like, yeah, roughhouser, rebounder, but no offensive game whatsoever. And then at this point, and you mentioned Rolando Blackman. Yeah, that guy was amazing as a Maverick. He was 34, 35 years old during this point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, Hubert Davis, yeah, okay, he just got fired as North Carolina's coach, but his NBA career was meh. So the depth on this team was low.
Well,
And so it's almost, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'll say like the offensive depth was
The
low.
offensive depth, yeah,
Yeah.
was low. And we were also going into the time in basketball where the scores were low and it was about, just beating the other guy over the head. But yeah, the offensive depth on this team, there's no shooters. And so Starks was your guy. That was the guy you had. He helped you get there, and you're gonna ride their horse, right? That got you there.
Well,
So I agree with you.
yeah. I'll tell you who wasn't scoring. And I made this point in an earlier episode. My feelings clear about Charles Smith driving down the lane and like kicking the ball out of bounds and pretending he was fouled. Like, so we could play that game but that's not going to work. So who's really going to make the difference? Again, they can win on defense, but at a certain point, you have to score. He didn't have it that night. His legs were out. And, and it wasn't like, oh, if so-and-so hit 2 more free throws, they would have won. It wasn't that, but like someone else just needed to step up in an offensive way, and they just didn't have it. So they ended up they score 80 points, 85 points a game. That sounds about right with a team like that in the mid 90s.
Well, what I
Also,
think
here's
is
an
so
interesting
funny-
fact.
Go ahead,
Go
John.
ahead, Steve.
Well, I think
the
it's so
interesting
funny.
fact.
I'll say, Steve, you go first.
Yeah.
Thank you. What I think is ironic / funny / humorous is so game 6, Knicks are up 3-2. They've got a lead with a minute and a half to go. And then a couple things happen. A turnover here, a missed shot there, and they lose. But for that, we're singing a different tune, right? They won in the late 70s, they won in the 90s. It's funny, and it comes down to execution at the end of the game on these small things, and that's the difference between legacies. That's the difference between, Riles not having any rings as a Knick and not. It's all these things. So I'm with you. I mean, they were close. They were right there. And yeah, they would not have been there without Starks. The idea that your shooting guys could go that cold in game 6 and game 7, I could understand as a coach, you'd think, hey, keep shooting. It's going to snap out of it. At some point, though, it's not. And it's just so weird in big game situations, whether it's a reliever who can't find the plate or whatever, and now the hindsight is Riley regrets not putting in Rolando Blackman, but hindsight's 2020, and I just find it so fascinating in the history of sports that these very small margins are over the time become huge. So now the Knicks are this weird semi-laughing stock franchise. The Dolan wants to win the championship, but of course that's not going to happen. But they're good. They're very relevant. They're always right there. But it's just a break. It's just may I say, Jonathan, intangibles make the difference.
Jonathan, what were you
Here's your
gonna say?
intangibles. Here's your intangibles. The Knicks averaged making 3.9 3-pointers a game. 3.9. Steph by himself makes that. Like, it surpasses it. They averaged 98.5 points a game. This wasn't intangibles. This was, hey, you got 2 guys that can score, and in a defensive league where the defensive rules were kind of tilted towards that side, and you got a bunch of bricklayers. I mean, Greg Anthony, Anthony Mason, Anthony Bonner, Hubert Davis, Derek Harper, Charles Smith, Rolando Blackman, Herb Williams, Doc Rivers, Tony Campbell. I mean, these guys weren't shooters. The only guys that could score on this whole team, Patrick Ewing, John Starks. How do you defend that? Just beat those 2 guys up.
Well, yeah, and also, and then like occasionally Oakley will hit those 18-footers along the baseline, which is great. And that would be like, okay, we got like a third guy tonight who can hit a couple shots. But also, if you think about like who they were playing and matched up against, like the Rockets probably not the best matchup, right? Like, okay, you actually have a center who can move and who's obviously one of the best centers ever. And then you had some outside guys who can defend. pretty well. And so you lock down Starks. Again, I just think he didn't have his legs by the end of it. And Steve's favorite player, Robert Ory, was around. And so, like, how are the Knicks supposed to win? You know? So that was the start of the Robert Ory legacy for Steve. So anyway, I'll stop with the John Starks piece, other than the fact that favorite player, had his jersey, had the poster in my bedroom of him dunking. I'll say it was over Jordan, although Jordan was just in the picture, but just dunking over a couple Bulls. Really like my favorite moment as a Knick. And, that was the start of like, okay, they're right here. Granted, the other part to this is like Jordan wasn't there, right? So Jordan wasn't around for a couple of years, and that's where the Knicks, road to success was a little bit easier. So, 95, they don't make it to the finals. The Magic make it to the finals against the Rockets. And then after the season, Steve's guy, Pat Riley, doesn't hold a press conference, doesn't talk to the team, but does something so 1995 or really 1985 and sends a fax. Faxes his way out of New York and goes to the Heat. That was the start of really one of my favorite rivalries, was Knicks Heat. And so, in addition to some of the players who were on the Heat, the fact that it was Pat Riley as well was awesome for the next few years. Now, if you think about it, though, the Knicks got lucky. Not because they lost Riley. I mean, because what happens right after Riley? Like, it could have gone really bad, right? Like, oh my God, what do we do? Like, we had our guy, and now how do we find another guy? But they just go next man up, and somehow that's Van Gundy. And, Van Gundy did an okay job. Jonathan has a take on this.
But before Van Gundy, you had an interim coach,
Herb?
Don Nelson.
Not then? I thought he came later.
95-96 season, Don Nelson, 34-25. So
Yeah.
Riles leaves. He's 55-27, second in the NBA. And then the very next season, Nelson starts. Also, as a note, Steve, the GM for the Knicks, is Bernard King's guy.
Ernie?
Ernie Gartheld,
Yep.
Tennessee.
So the next couple years, let's call it 97 and really through the end of the 90s, the attention went toward the Heat and the Pacers in terms of the hatred, right, and the rivalry. There was the 1997 brawl where LJ and Alonzo Mourning are fighting. Van Gundy's holding on to his leg. That was awesome. I actually remember exactly where I was. I was actually driving home from a baseball game. We're listening to the radio and hear that happened. And I got so excited because I remembered I had actually set my VCR to record that game. And so the first thing I thought was like, oh my gosh, I have this on tape. I can now just go home and watch this in slow motion over and over and over again. And that was such a gift, since there was no other way to really get something like that other than you could watch a clip on SportsCenter, but you weren't getting the, oh my, I can just watch this over and over again in slow motion. So that was awesome. Also at the same time, the thing I really don't like to talk about is Reggie Miller and the 8 points in 9 seconds. And that, again, back, Steve, to your point, is just like not finishing out these games, right? And that, I guess, is really the trend we see, right? It happened in 1994. It happened here. It's continued to happen. It happened last year against the
happened
Pacers.
last year.
Yeah, against the Pacers, right?
Against the Pacers.
Yeah, it's like, oh God. and it's happening right now. And so it's just like I'd almost rather a blowout and not have my hopes set at the end of the game that they're about to win, right? Like what's the point of that? Like that's just painful. It's like at least okay, if it's a blowout, then I can just like turn this off and well, we were out of our league. That's one thing. It's one thing if it's like okay, we're out of our league, we lost. It's another if it's like we should have beat this team. Like come on, Reggie Miller scores 8 points, chucking threes, and we're just passing him the ball. Like give me a break. So that was really rough. I'll tell you the other part was the other fight, the Charlie Ward, PJ Brown fight in Miami. Do you remember that fight?
That's
I
where
vaguely remember it, but I remember Charlie Ward was the guy. He was like a Heisman Trophy candidate, great quarterback at Florida State, but not really pro material. And then played point guard. Yeah, I like Charlie Ward, and PJ Washington's like 7 inches taller, right?
Brown.
PJ
PJ
Brown.
Brown.
Yeah. PJ
Yeah,
Brown.
I don't really remember the fight.
Yeah. So free throw. Charlie Ward is trying to box out PJ Brown. PJ Brown picks him up, tosses him, and then massive fight.
This is the incident that creates the rule where
Yes.
players are not allowed to leave the bench.
Yes. So this is just going to get there. This because the Knicks really got the worst part of this deal. Like they all got suspended. They got more suspensions than the Heat did. And then that rule is in play. And, that was so painful. I remember that game so well, and it just ruined the series. Like the Knicks couldn't come back from that. I remember the New York Post had a picture of John Starks giving the finger to the Miami crowd, which is great. I saved that Post edition. There was one good moment during this era. So this is basically like I should have called this the Act Two of the era here. Was Larry Johnson and his 4-point play against the Pacers. This was actually the Knicks doing something at the end of a game and like having it go their way, where Larry Johnson was taking a three, he was fouled, hits it, had the 4-point play, Knicks win. Do either of you remember that game?
I remember the 4-play play, but I don't think I was actually watching it. I probably saw it on replay. So I can't say that I recall that game specifically. How about you?
Yeah, I don't recall that game. I was always a big Larry Johnson fan from his days at UNLV, but I just remember those series were so dramatic, whether it's the Pacers or the Heat, and there's all of these heroes and villains and ups and downs, very dramatic. So, but I don't remember Larry's 4-point play.
Yeah, so this was June 1999, Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and it was pretty brutal. But it was vindication of like, oh my gosh, like finally something goes well for the Knicks. Because if you remember, was it 1995 against the Pacers, Eastern Conference semifinals. Again, no Jordan. Knicks had just been in the finals in '94. So, like, we're going to do this again and we're going to win. The Knicks lose on a missed finger roll by Patrick Ewing to the Pacers.
I remember this.
To the rim, missed finger roll. Again, same thing I'll say about Starks, I'll say about Ewing. Like his leg was injured that series. I actually think he couldn't get higher off the ground because of his injury. And so he had to finger roll and he missed it. And that was just I was so upset. That was probably the angriest I ever was as a Knicks fan. And maybe angry is not the right word. The most upset as a Knicks fan I was actually that play. Because of that could come, and the fact that this was against the Pacers and Reggie Miller was really just so upsetting to me.
Well, and this is where the advent of the Reggie Miller choke sign. This is also, I remember that because I was wondering, and I remember talking with a whole bunch of people. It's like, why didn't he take a half a step or another dribble and dunk the ball?
Yeah.
Because he didn't need to jump from as far out, and he was kind of, like you said, kind of dinged up, and then trying to do, and it was, if I remember right, it was like an awkward
Yeah.
kind of layup. It didn't it like hit the heel and bounce back or something like that. I might be remember that wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah, it hit like the back of the rim.
yeah,
Yeah, and just came out like there was no spin on the ball, there was nothing. It was just
right.
and he just couldn't elevate. And you know, again, to your point, I think it was really he was injured. There was nothing. It was an awkward move, and that was all he could do. And again, I wasn't upset with him. You know, I think a lot of people were like, oh, he can't win. But again, like he got them there. Like, can he get a little help? Also, he's been injured. But that was really the most upset I ever was as a Knicks fan. Things didn't get better after that. They did for a moment in the lockout season, but I do want to switch topics for a minute and do a little game. So I have a couple games for you. This is the surprise I mentioned just before we hopped on this, that I have 3 surprises for you. So the first is a game because in the late 90s, I think it was 99, Steve, you mentioned it, your favorite, James Dolan, took over as full-time owner of the Knicks. And he's been pretty controversial, I'd say, right? Maybe not the best owner, the best leader. Do you two have any thoughts on him?
I mean, the guy's garbage. He also owns the Sphere, and you've just heard the news probably this week on how they're basically he's been doxing people in the stadium using facial recognition and targeting different people, different genders, different persuasions, people with signs against them, and they are banning people from the Garden and having them removed. I mean, the guy's a piece of work. He's just, to me, seems like someone that, hey, I got a lot of money, so I think because I have a lot of money, I have a lot of privilege, and I should get away with a whole bunch of stuff, and just the world should bend to my knee. You know? How about you, Steve?
I'm not big on owners. He does sound like a piece of work, to paraphrase what you're saying, Jonathan. My thing is, owners, I'm not sure what they should be involved, and he seems like he's way more hands-on than he should be. And it sounds like everyone is terrified to work for him. And his goals are probably unrealistic, certainly this season. So yeah, he sounds like a pretty bad owner. He's one of those, I wouldn't say he's Artie Moreno, but he's one of the guys that's probably very good at making money. I'm not sure if the best owners are ones who just stay way out of the way and just, hire some smart people, whether GM or not. But, he tried Isaiah Thomas for a while. He's tried people. Nothing really seems to work. And then, I will say, not jumping too far ahead, but, Tom Thibodeau did a great job for the Knicks. He just did. Now, if the players are sick of him, I get it. But, he's a very successful coach, respected by pretty much all his peers. And, it just happens. So I'm not sure how much you can dump on Dolan. And I like dumping on owners because they deserve it. But, he doesn't strike me as a very good owner. But, New York New York's a big place. And the owners kind of stand out, whether it's on the Jets or the Giants or the Yankees or whatever it is. So it doesn't seem like a wallflower would really fit in there. So I'm not sure. But I do not have a positive opinion of Dolan. Although I saw a Grateful Dead show at the Sphere, and the Sphere is a nice place.
So it comes down to leadership. And so I wanted to play a little game. I should have asked you this ahead of time, but I hope you two are fans of The Office or
Yeah.
Aware of the Show. Okay.
Sure.
So I'd like to describe a situation and you tell me who is this more like, James Dolan or Michael Scott? You can debate this. So first is confidently sticking with the plan that most outsiders think isn't working?
I
Who's that
mean,
more like?
that's got to be Dolan. Like Michael Scott has no plan.
Fair. He has his own way, right?
He has
Maybe
his
not a
own
plan.
way, but he never really has a plan. And in a weird way, when they get into some of these situations, especially when it's customer v customer, somehow Michael Scott like prevails. Like he actually does a really good job, and you're totally shocked, and it comes out of nowhere. And maybe in his mind he has something planned all along, but it's not transparent to the viewer. So I'm going Dolan on this one. What do you think, Steve?
I'll go Dolan also.
Yeah. Do you have? I can give you an example of him doing this, unless there are multiples. But do you have an example? Otherwise, I'll feed you one. I'll feed you one. Um, the whole let's do the triangle offense with Phil Jackson era uh, wasn't going to work in today's NBA. But they stuck with it, and it's a way to try to be retro. That really, he was pretty stubborn about keeping him, and paid him what, $50 million. So that was great.
Well, you also had a problem with the triangle offense. It works really good when you have a guy drafted number one overall from North Carolina. Then your triangle works really, really well. I hear.
But not drafted number one. But yes, is a number one.
Oh, drafted number two. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah,
Sam
yeah,
Bowie.
yeah.
Apologies. Yes, yes,
And
yes.
also,
But
well, it works in a place when you have, like this awesome dude out of high school who becomes one of the best players ever, and you have this center who's also one of the best players ever. Um, the Knicks almost had those pieces, but just didn't. So that was one. Um, Here's another. Responds directly to criticism and makes the situation worse.
Definitely James
uh,
Dolan.
Charles Oakley, right? He had Charles Oakley
Yeah.
removed from the building because he was criticizing him, and he told him he's not allowed at the Garden anymore. I mean, that's probably the most obvious one.
Yeah. There was also a time when he was emailing a fan who was complaining, telling them then to root for the Nets instead. So,
I vaguely remember hearing about this, so that's true. That's not a rumor. That actually happened. That's not like a rumor.
yeah, that one happened. Um, all right, let me skip. I want to be sure we're good on time. There's so much more to talk about. Um,
At 25, 20 minutes.
Go with this one. Believes being a good leader is mostly about vibes and confidence. Who's more like that?
Sounds like
Well,
Michael.
doesn't Dolan have his doesn't he have like a band? The Dolan,
Yes, he
what does
does.
he call it?
Yeah.
I'm going Michael Dolan on this because he's got that band that he thinks is so good, like it's like this dad band or whatever the heck it is. I'm going Dolan.
Yeah, look, there's no wrong answer here. The point is, there's a lot of similarity. It's just one is funny and the other is painful. And so that was the point. But that leads into this era of, Steve, to your point, it's not that they didn't have some players during this time. There were some players they had, but a lot of bad decisions came with it too. So in terms of good players, I like you loved Larry Johnson as part of the team. I loved Allen Houston. He was my favorite after Starks left. I liked Spreewell. I even liked Chris Child. I liked these guys, and it was cool seeing their run during the lockout season where they made it to the finals against the Spurs. They were an 8 seed. That was another one where, oh my gosh, they actually did something at the end of a game where they were playing the Heat. Allen Houston drives down the middle, gets a floater in, Knicks win. That was just like just a surprise. That's probably my second favorite moment after the LJ 4-point play. But at the same time, the Knicks just made a lot of bad decisions. So the can you think of, this isn't a full-on game, but just want to talk about draft picks for a moment. Can you think of any favorite draft picks after Patrick Ewing that the Knicks have had?
Oh, who's the Euro guy? I know there's more than one. Is it Bargnani? Am I saying it right? Was he a Nick?
He was a Knick, but he was not drafted.
He wasn't drafted. Well, who was
Yeah.
the? There was a Euro guy that they drafted in the first round that basically flamed out, like right around the Bargnani years. Oh,
So the famous one is in 1999. And this is when I used to follow the NBA draft as like really probably my favorite night of the NBA season, other than the Saturday night skills competition and the shooting contest, is the NBA draft. I used to do my own draft board, have a whole list and be like, okay, like, the Knicks have a later pick. Who are they going to get? Who's still left? And, I'm sitting there, picks are going. I think the Knicks were drafting 12th. And the 11th pick happens by another team. And they say the name and I get super excited because I'm like, this is awesome. The Knicks can get a hometown guy. The Knicks can get Ron Artest. And so waiting for the pick. The pick comes in. It doesn't begin with an R. It begins with a Frederick Weiss.
oh
They
my
draft,
gosh!
they draft him. Do you know what he is most famous for? Is in his basketball career?
I don't. Man, that name
I,
just is funny though to hear because I haven't heard that name in forever.
well, I will
How
tell
about
you.
you?
Yeah, Steve, do you know? You're shaking your head
No,
no,
I
but
don't.
do you remember?
No.
The most famous moment of his career led him to not being in the NBA was in um, Olympic basketball or World Championship basketball. Um, Vince Carter dunks over him, jumps over him. That
Oh
was pretty much the end.
yeah.
That dunk, the dunk where he jumps over him, then he lands, he's screaming, his leg is twitching because he just jumped over like a 7'3" guy. Kevin Garnett is, jumping all over him as well because this is ridiculous. You just jumped over this huge dude. That's the guy the Knicks drafted. So instead of Ron Artest from St. John's. So that really was probably the hardest pick to deal with. And the Knicks had a lot of bad picks over the years. I'll throw out a couple names. John Wallace was actually considered like a good pick.
Yeah. Was he
For the Knicks.
Syracuse?
Yeah, Syracuse. Then they got Walter McCarty.
From Kentucky, and he was
Yep.
terrible.
Yep.
And everyone tried to pick every single starter on that Kentucky team that year,
Yep.
and they got the
Yeah.
worst. They got the worst one out of all of them.
Yep. They picked Nene.
And I mean,
They
you know,
traded him. They picked him, but they traded
Yeah.
him. And you know who was picked after him was Amari Stoudemire. Could have had that.
well, they ended up getting Almore.
They did in the later years, which is just, again, go back to the sometimes we're a little early, sometimes we're a little late.
Also, you kind of missed a couple when you talked about those Pacer teams in the late '90s, but you guys were playing against Chris Mullin, St. John's, and Mark
Yeah.
Jackson,
Mark Jackson.
the guy that you guys actually drafted and got rid of.
Yeah.
So you're playing against two New York guys in your building getting smoked.
Yeah. And then we didn't learn only 5 years later, hey, let's take the St. John's guy who's like actually good. And instead, we'll take the dude who Vince Carter's going to jump over. So another one was they took Michael Sweetney, if you remember him. I think he was a Georgetown guy, instead of David West or Boris Diaw.
You know,
And so-
both those guys were solid.
Yeah.
And David West won a championship with the Warrior.
Yeah, he's a good player. Would have
He
been
helped
nice.
them unlock down high posts and move the ball around, and he was obviously a Hornet and was really solid there for them. Yeah,
He was a pacer. Yeah.
And DL got San Antonio.
Yep. So
Michael Sweet
anyway,
is another name.
yeah. So right around that time, Dolan was like, "Hey, look, we should try to do something really good now. So we should bring in Isaiah Thomas."
Isaiah.
And so 2003 to 2008 is the Isaiah era.
Call it the Isaiah era, or do we call it sexual harassment era, or what do we do?
Those,
Is there another name for that?
Chaos is the name. So the Knicks decided they should trade for Eddie Curry. If you remember Eddie Curry, top pick of the Chicago Bulls.
Right.
So they gave up a couple draft picks to get him. Do you know who those draft picks became?
Oh my gosh. So these would be Bulls, or did those picks go somewhere else?
Those are Bulls. You may not think of one of them as a Bull, but he was a Bull and then went somewhere else.
Zach LaVine, is he one of them?
No, do you think I would care about that one? Come on.
No.
Talk about,
so
you know.
somebody of ilk, huh? A Chicago Bull that makes a difference. Man, who is it, Steve?
I don't know. I'm
These
stumped
aren't
on
like, you know. Yeah, okay. These aren't like, you know, the biggest names ever, but like we would have been happy with both those guys or just not Eddie Curry. LaMarcus Aldridge.
I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge was perennial all-star. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And Joe
He was,
So
Camillo.
he ended up
scoring team. He was a guy from Texas that could flat out score from anywhere. He was I think a fairly underrated player, real good, real solid player.
Who was the other? I'm sorry.
Joakim Noah was the other one, who later became a Knick in his late years. So again, just getting him later on.
Yeah, but I mean, he
Noah
was
a solid player.
Defensive player, you know, all defensive team for several years. Yeah, that guy was solid. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. So that was the trade. It's, you know, which is worse, that trade or, I mean, I know which one's worse. The one I'm about to mention is worse is the one that the Clippers are dealing with right now still is the Paul George Oklahoma City trade, right? That one's worse, right? A lot worse. You gave away SGA and still have to give some picks.
SGA, and then now you just gave up a lottery pick.
Yeah,
I think
this
that is way worse. I mean, Eddie Curry, you know, is one of these guys, high school to the pros, you know, bit of a body issue thing. And I can see why you gamble on him. And Isaiah was, you know, from Chicago, so he probably had some insight or failed insight. But, you know, that's a big risk, Roland. You know, that's kind of the Josh Hamilton thing, man. You give all your money and you make the team built around a very fragile, insecure guy. You can't really expect positive things to happen.
Yep. Well, then there was another trade. This one sounded good when they got Carmelo Anthony in 2011. Do you remember who was in this deal? Who did the Knicks get from the Nuggets? A bunch of guys.
Well, they got Danilo, right?
No, they gave him. They gave Yeah. So the Knicks received Carmelo.
Oh, you mean from?
Yeah, from Denver, who they got.
Oh, from Denver. I thought you meant going the other way.
Sorry. Yeah. From Denver. You got Carmelo, Chauncey Billups, our guy.
He came with Chauncey?
Yeah, later years. Yeah. Yep. Anthony Carter,
Oh.
Rolando Blackman, and Sheldon Williams. And the Nuggets received Wilson Chandler, Raymond Felton, Danilo Gallinari, Mozgov, Timofey Mozgov. Forgot about that pick. Classic.
He
And
got
then
paid by Cleveland.
yeah, and then a 2014 first round pick, 2012 and 2013 second round picks, and cash. So I actually was not a huge fan of this deal at the time, not because I didn't want Carmelo. It was great. The Knicks actually probably could have waited to get him in free agency and instead paid, a lot with players. And my concern was, and I think it became true, is they gave up a lot and then Carmelo just didn't have a lot to work with in New York. Not that the Knicks completely failed. They didn't win a title, but they made the playoffs and they became relevant and Carmelo was a solid Knick. And I liked Chauncey Billups as a Knick. Obviously, he's going through a lot of problems now, but at the time, Billups was a great player. Did you guys
Was
like
he
him?
shaving games then?
I don't know. Did you guys like him back in the day?
As a Piston, yeah.
Yeah.
That Piston team, because, everyone knows I'm a Laker hater. So the fact that you had that Pistons team that took down the Laker, and strangely enough, you would think that team, Steve, that's going to be, that's your kind of team, is it not? It's not no superstar, all intangible guys. Tayshaun Prince can do a little bit of everything. You got Rip Hamilton. Ben Wallace. That's your kind of team, is it not, Steve?
Yeah, I did I did not like the Pistons, obviously, against the Lakers. But yeah, all those guys, I think they did the one thing that Magic did, which is they made each other better. Kind of getting to Kobe out of nowhere. Kobe, didn't really care if teammates did well or not. He wanted to do it himself. Magic tried to make people better. And so when you asked, did I think Chauncey Billups was good? I never thought he was that good, but he was a great situation. He was the perfect guy for the Pistons, fit in really well. So on the Knicks, on a lesser team that they didn't play defense and didn't have a lot of really tight possessions, he was obviously a good player. He was a great player, but I think he and Rip Hamilton both benefited from Chuck Daly's offense, how they played defense a little bit. They were, you're right, Jonathan. They were a good, solid team, and I think as a team,
Wasn't it Larry Brown?
elevated their individual abilities, which was a little too much. So I don't know.
I think it was Larry Brown and Rick Carlisle. I don't think it was.
Yeah.
Was it Chuck Daly? Okay.
No, I think Chuck
I think
Daly
he was gone.
Rest in power, Chuck Daly. He might not have been around. Around. I'll check on that, but go ahead.
So I want to switch to another game for a minute, and then we'll get to the more recent years. I'm skipping over some stuff, but the next game we're going to play, because we've already mentioned a couple random guys, is did he ever wear a Knicks jersey?
Ooh, I love these games.
Okay, so we mentioned Chauncey, in case some of us forgot about that one. Derrick Rose.
Yeah, absolutely was a Nick.
Yeah, starting easy.
And you know what? He was solid.
And
Let's call it was. A
yeah,
couple
he
years
was good.
ago,
Yes,
Like
he was
for
good.
the
He
amount
was
of minutes,
sixth man.
for the
Yeah.
for the amount of minutes that he was playing and what he was contributing, he was. He was playing 19, 20 minutes a game, and he was
Absolutely.
doing exactly what you want for that. He was really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I agree. He was. And everyone was rooting for him. New York loved him because this was a great story, and he was so good, and you just wanted to see him succeed. All right, I'll throw out another one. Ray Allen.
No, Ray Allen's never
Allen?
there.
I don't think so.
He was not.
Oh, okay. Woo!
Next one.
Guthrie's saying no.
Yeah. DeAndre Jordan.
DeAndre Jordan was a Nick. I remember seeing him on the bench a couple of years ago.
Yes. Okay. Baron Davis.
Aaron Davis was a Nick.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Aaron, don't test me on, we are family warriors. Like, come on. Warrior.
True. Dwight Howard.
No.
Okay, so Howard was a Laker, and then he went to Houston. I'm gonna say no.
That is correct. He was not a Knick. Asia.
Peja Stojakovic? Oh man, where did Peja go?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
It's not.
Okay.
Steve
Asia
Francis.
played in the Final Four.
Yeah.
Stevie
What's his
Franchise, yes. Stevie Franchise, yes, he was a Knick. Stevie Franchise. What's our man who went to China? He was a Timberwolf.
From Marbury.
Yes, Starberry, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah, of course. Another hometown guy.
yeah.
Jason Kidd.
No.
Yes.
He was a Net, but he was also a Knick.
You
Oh,
well, I thought I remembered
Yeah.
him as a Knick. I thought he was there. Woo!
Tyson Chandler. So we talked about Eddie Curry. What about Tyson Chandler?
Absolutely, because he lead the
was he
league in
drafted by the
rebounds or
Knicks?
something?
He was not drafted by the Knicks. He was drafted by the Bulls as well with Curry. But then came to the Knicks later when he was big, strong. He was good. He was a good Knick. He was a really good
I
Knick.
think he either led the league in rebounds or maybe in block shots or something as a Knick. Like, yeah, he was
Yeah.
solid.
Just a couple more. Chris Paul.
Man, those last few years.
I'd say
I
no.
don't think. Well, he left the Warriors, but I mean, he was a Warrior. He was a Rocket. He went back to the Clipper.
Thunder.
I'm gonna say no. He was not.
He was not, but I always wished he were. Rasheed Wallace.
Rashid.
I
Pistons.
don't think he was Nick.
Blazers. Did Sheed go to the? No, I don't think Sheed was a Knick.
Was. Very
was?
briefly. Yeah, that one I didn't remember either, but yeah, for a brief moment. Kenyon Martin.
Kmart.
Yeah,
I'll say
I
no
think he
to
did.
Martin.
I thought he did at the end.
He was a Net, but he was
Yep.
also a Knick.
Yeah.
And then Kemba Walker.
Walker was a Knick. I almost 100% right because Kimba went to Celtic. I think Kemba Walker was a Knick for a minute.
Was a Knick.
And this is from a guy who doesn't watch that much basketball really.
I
in the
know.
last few
I'm
years.
impressed. All right. Last one. Derek Fisher.
Well, he was almost the coach. You know what? So Fisher was a Warrior, and then he might have been a Thunder, and he was like bouncing around. I think Derek Fisher was a Knick for like half a season. Steve, what do you think?
I say no, but not confidently.
He was just the coach.
He was just the coach. He never was a player. For some reason,
Yeah.
I don't know why. Because Derek Fisher, everyone seemed to think that Derek Fisher was the missing piece for the playoffs,
Right.
and people
right.
were trying to get him at the end. And strangely enough, I think he might be top 10 or top 20 all time in playoff appearances, playoff game appearances. Some crazy
sounds
stat
about
like
right.
that.
Yep. All right. So back to it. Where did I leave off here? Okay. So Carmelo comes. Phil Jackson comes. Also in this period, you have Linsanity. I wasn't really a big fan of Linsanity. Just thought it was a show and like whatever. The Knicks were not a good team. Come on, it's not like they were good. It's like false hope.
No, they
Who
weren't.
cares?
But it was a great 2 weeks.
It was it was really cool. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, like go to Vegas, just bet it all. Like you're just making every shot. It was insane, but it just wasn't like as a fan of like the Knicks wanting the Knicks to succeed. I'm like, well, this doesn't really matter. But yeah, Phil Jackson's there. He drafted Frank Ntilikina. You remember that?
That's the guy I was thinking of.
The point guard, little guy.
I think so.
Yeah, could have had Donovan Mitchell, but yeah. So, and then also that was the false hope, like that they were going to get around that time Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Maybe it was okay that that didn't happen. And then we get to more of the present. Finally something goes right. They get Brunson. They get Brunson at a good price. His dad joins them. Thibodeau's there, Steve, like you said, and the Knicks get an identity back, right? Like I felt like for a long time they didn't have the identity. They weren't like the tough guys. They weren't relevant that much, and Brunson brought a ton of energy just back to the team and Thibodeau. I was sad to see him go because I felt like he brought a culture back that was needed. And that the fans could rally around. I wouldn't say they're doing better right now without him. And I think also that they made a mistake with some of the trades. I don't think the Cat trade was a great one. I don't think that that's the piece that's going to win a title. And I don't think they should have traded 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. I actually like Bridges, but that's way too much. The Knicks had made so many good moves, and that one was just going over your skis. That's not the one where you saved all this draft capital and you're going to spend it on him. It's not that he's not good. I think he's a good piece, but that's way too much for that guy when you could use those draft picks in a few other ways. So
you could have got Paul George for that.
Yes, exactly. Except we wouldn't be giving away SGA. We'd give, some scrub off the bench. I got one more game for you. Let me find it. This one is called, wait for it, Ripped from the New York Times headlines or made up?
New York Times or New York Post? Come on, it's got to be the Post, no?
No, I'm doing New York Times because even there was still some real headlines.
Oh, okay.
Curry trade continues to pay dividends for Bulls.
Sounds like a New York Times headline.
Yeah, I agree with Steve.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Now hiring president, New York Knicks, no experience necessary.
Oh, that sounds like that sounds like a Post one. So I'm gonna say no, it's not a New York Times. Go ahead, Steve.
I say it's New York Times.
What is the New York Times headline?
New York Times had a headline like that. Wow, that just doesn't seem like the Times. That seems like the Post.
Times can be snarky at times, especially about things like sports.
Bill Jackson's beloved triangle, a symbol of hubris.
Oh, that's hubris. That's a Times word. Day of the word of the day. I'm going New York Times. Yes.
I say no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Feels
hubris,
fake, but it is real. Yeah.
No, hubris. That's a New York Times word of the day deal.
Knicks announced rebuild is officially complete.
When was that? So they think it was that last week or something. That one sounds fake. Only from when did this happen?
But you could see Dolan saying that, though, right? He could say that.
Oh yeah. Oh well, yeah. It's like a Trumpism thing, right? It's like as long as you say it loud enough, it must be true.
Right.
Oh man, I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
I think yes.
I'll go with Steve only by the fact that maybe they thought it was complete after the Cat trade. I don't know.
It was not real, but feels like something they would say, that the Knicks would say, and that the New York Times would report. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll wrap up.
Got you.
Knicks win draft lottery and trade pick immediately.
That's fake. I think that's fake.
It seems like something they would do, but that one's fake.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I couldn't think of
Why?
where that actually would happen.
The Knicks may not be dreaming big enough.
Go ahead, Steve.
That sounds real to me.
It does. That sounds plausible. Yeah.
It is real. And it was around the time that they made their big free agent move for this guy who I have not mentioned yet, but was also just a real bad couple of years in New York.
Amari
with a bad-
Stoudemire.
Nope.
Not
Worse.
Amari.
Much worse. Not as big either.
Mike
Not
Murray
even just
Richardson.
height big. Evan Fournier.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
That was their guy. That was their big move. The Knicks are big, man. Why they're thinking big in a small ball NBA world?
Yeah, I'm going. That's real.
You think that is real or not real, Jonathan?
I think it's real. Because there was
I say
that
it's
time
not.
where they had their front court was all like 6'10", couldn't shoot. That sounds real to me.
That's exactly what that's from. So in one offseason, they signed 5 power forwards.
Yeah.
Julius Randle, Marcus Morris, Taj Gibson, and Bobby Portis. And they also had Mitchell Robinson and Kevin Knox on the team.
Yeah, I vaguely remember when they were making fun of them. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
I actually hadn't remembered that. I think I just blocked it out because of how miserable that sounded. So yeah, that was it for games. And then really, I know we're just about out of time, but like here we are today, the Knicks starting the season, for unfortunate reasons, like, oh, okay, the decks are kind of cleared for the Knicks to run the East, right? Celtics had a bad injury, Pacers had a bad injury. Knicks have proven they can beat the Pistons, they can beat the Cavs. They end up third in the East for the regular season after the Pistons and after the Celtics even. And then they draw the Hawks and they're down 2-1 off of 2 really heartbreaking games. And, it's just the same story year after year with them of these bad losses. I love them. I want them to win. I hope they'll win. But I think it's going to be a little time before it happens. That's all I got.
So
That's.
I was in.
I mean, go ahead, Jonathan.
I was incorrect. Derek Fisher is not top 20 all time in playoff appearances. He's number 2, behind only LeBron.
I was going to say, I'm sure he was. Wow, number 2. I didn't realize that. Wow.
259. LeBron's at 294.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough for the Knicks. I mean, right? Let's just take the last couple seasons. They're a good team. They're one of the top 7 or 8 teams in the NBA. They consistently they have a style. They have an identity. They play good basketball. But I haven't thought of them as a championship team in the last in a while. So it's tricky when you get to that sweet spot where they're expected to win at least 1 round, maybe 2, and that might be their ceiling. But yeah, it's just hard having these franchises that are close but no cigar, and the Knicks have been kind of doing that. And I wonder how much the legacy of those championship Knicks teams affects them, because it's kind of like, oh, hey, we did it once. We just need the blueprint, the formula, the secret sauce, but it just never works. So yeah, in this, 2 tough losses to the Hawks by 1 point in each game. I mean, otherwise, hey, they're up 3-0 and they're talking about, hey, they're rolling. And the East, the East is shaky this year. I mean, the Pistons are up and down. The Celtics, no one really knows. So it could be, but it's just those little things, and they're just not dropping for them. So I feel your pain. What's that?
I was going to add, like, you reminded me that, a lot of also what the Knicks were doing was, the pressure of New York and saying, we're going to get this guy. This guy's going to want to come here because it's New York. You play at the Garden. But that just didn't happen. It was, they missed on LeBron. They missed on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. There are other guys they missed along the way. And, one thing I do appreciate one of the things, because there are a few things, one of the things I appreciate about Brunson was like, he made it cool to come to New York again. Like, there was no reason to come to New York before Brunson was there. And Brunson wanted to come because he has a connection to the Knicks and the organization. And that also just made a huge difference. You know, like now they have some guys, you know, again, is it the right mix of guys? That's a different story. But the fact that they got some guys, you know, Josh Hart also is a great culture guy, also wears number 3 like Starks, which is cool. And then I forgot one guy to mention who I loved in the late 90s was Marcus Camby when he was a Knick. That was a fun team. Same era as Allen Houston and Latrell. It was fun seeing him there. So, Jonathan, you want to take us out? Any final words about the Knicks?
I don't make fun of you about the Knicks because it's like throwing stones in glass houses when it comes to the Raiders. So it's like I empathize so much for you and with you, and I have found myself this last few years rooting for the Knicks in the playoffs because I want them to do well so that you can be happy. That's like how much I really wish that it happens.
Good friends.
And then last year when they had that game where they fell apart and they gave up, 8 free throws or something crazy in the last minute and lost, like I was as upset like for you than I would be if it was the Raiders like losing to the Chiefs in the last second.
Yeah.
So
well, the Halliburton, yeah, no, you're a good friend because that Halliburton game last year, like really what it did was actually bring back just all the bad feelings in the 90s of all those bad moments to the point where I'm like, I gotta stop just having any hopes up because it's really like, it hurt. It really hurt. And it brought back all these bad feelings from 20 years ago. And so, or 30 years ago, what am I kidding? So, I appreciate you supporting me on it. I think the one solace I have is that I'm not a Jets fan because telling that story would be the most miserable thing. It'd be a horror show. We'd have to change the genre of this podcast. That's how I'm ending it. Just making fun of the Jets.
all right, Steve, get us out of here.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I think you've seen that the three of us have love-hate relationships with our teams, whether it's the Angels or Jonathan's Raiders or the Knicks. It's tough to watch sometimes, but it's also fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will be back next week. And maybe one day Will Clark will come on our show and make Jonathan's day. See you, everybody.